Hello adventurers and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm so excited because we are about to go over to something pretty neat here in the Laramie area. Just a short distance to the east of Laramie, well kind of southeast along I-80. There's something pretty neat that I found the last time that I was up here that I wanted to tell you a little bit more about today. But we have to get there first, so I'm packing up camp and then we're heading out. Window covers are down, everything's stocked, and what is this? The Lincoln Monument. That's where we're going today. This is a stop along the Lincoln Highway and one that definitely should be on your bucket list if you're coming through Wyoming. But why? Well, the Lincoln Highway is one of the original highways in the United States. Believe it or not, at one point in time, all of the ways that we traverse across this beautiful country did not exist. In fact, the highway infrastructure system wasn't something that they even thought they would have to have until commerce started to need highways, because the roads that they were traversing were pretty nasty and not really compatible with being able to move goods and services too well. And so they really started to put some attention into the highway system. And then the Lincoln was formed. Now, at one point, the Lincoln had numerous markers going in all sorts of directions and was kind of confusing and still wasn't paved. But it was a noted highway, and so as time has passed, the Lincoln Highway has of course had tons of improvements. They have turned into a full-on highway system, and along the way, if you take the entirety of the Lincoln, you can find some pretty neat historic stops. This is one of those. Now, at some point in the future, I am going to do the entirety of the Lincoln Highway just to show you guys all the cool stuff. However, today we have a unique opportunity to see something pretty epic. And so I thought that we would go to this little roadside and check it out. It's absolutely free and it's a good place for you to stretch, use the restroom, get some water, see something beautiful, and learn a little bit of history. Between Cheyenne and Laramie, Wyoming, Interstate 80 climbs to its highest point at an elevation of 8,640 feet at the summit of the Laramie Range in the scenic Pole Mountain area. Travelers have crossed this summit area since the last half of the 19th century. But in 1912, construction began on the Lincoln Highway, the first transcontinental highway, named in honor of Abraham Lincoln. It ran along the first transcontinental railroad route and was later designated U.S. Highway 30. In 1958, philanthropist Dr. Charles E. Jeffrey sponsored a project to erect Lincoln at this particular spot on Sherman Hill, the highest point of the highway. An 11-foot bronze bust was designed and created by Robert J. Russin, a former University of Wyoming art professor and Wyoming's best-known sculptor. It took over 11 months and 10 tons of clay to complete, and he needed to work constantly in favorable climates so that the 7,000-pound bust was formed and cast in Mexico City, and then it was transported by railroad to Wyoming, and whenever it arrived, the stone base for the sculpture was still unfinished. In order to meet the project deadlines, local crews worked around the clock to precisely cut all of the granite and assemble the 35-foot-tall stone base in only 1 week. Now, due to some crazy things that happened in 1969, this thing had to be relocated, and they had to do it painstakingly, stone by stone, and move it about a mile from its original location. So this has been moved. And so seeing it now, it's just so incredible, because not only is it a feat in the first place because they needed that climate control, so they had to build it all the way down in Mexico City, but then also the painstaking work of each block being cut precisely to match this perfect form, and then working around the clock, and then having to do all of that in reverse and then do it again in a different location. You can only imagine how nerve-wracking that would be, but it is an iconic piece of this highway today and something that I definitely encourage you guys to come out and see, and I think you can see why from checking this out. But there's a few more things inside this rest stop, so let's go inside and check them out. First off, lots of cool information about places we might want to go. Everything from here to Cody, Gillette, into South Dakota, it looks like. And then, of course, Denver, which isn't super far away. And then inside, there is this viewing area where you can learn about the Wyoming state parks and sites. And there's a video here that shows us the park that's not too far away from this location. They also have information here about the Wyoming national parks and sites. And some of these include, of course, Yellowstone, Fossil Butte, Devil's Tower, and then also Fort Laramie National Historic Site. But this room right here gives you beautiful views of the original Lincoln Highway and tells you some of the sites that are along the way. And as you're coming over here, you can learn all about the history of this area, from the military to recreation and everything in between. In addition, you can find out a little bit more about the completion of the Lincoln right here, and you can see what that process looked like. Of course, we learned that it was a painstaking process, and then they had to move it, and here is what that looked like. Again, it was commissioned in 1959 and was supposed to commemorate Lincoln's 150th birthday. The sculpture is 13.5 feet tall on a 35-foot pedestal, totaling 48.5 feet in height altogether. And of course, you can see it out here in contrast to the people who are walking by. This thing is huge, and it overlooks the highway, which is right over here. There's tons of cool information about the Lincoln Highway in general, and it shows us that if you continue going along here, you'll go through Rock River, Medicine Bow, Walcott, Table Rock, Green River, and Evanston, and you can see the difference between the original 1915 highway and then also the I-80, which ended up kind of flattening out some of these areas and bypassing some of them. I thought this was one of the cooler facts. It says here, thanks to the Boy Scouts in 1928, they began installing all of the Lincoln Highway signs, and they were marked with this L. And they would mark them on all major crossings and minor crossings, and there was one per mile was their goal, and they succeeded in installing more than 3,000 of these. It wasn't until 1926 that they changed over from letters to numbers, and anything running from east to west had an even number. Anything running from north to south would have an odd number. Pretty neat knowledge, to say the least, and definitely gives me some ideas as to some things that we should be doing here in Wyoming, but also along the Lincoln. And so I think you can see why I brought you guys here. This is pretty neat. The first in the West through which a telephone line was run. The first conversation over this line was held in 1882 between Bill Nye at Laramie and the Honorable F.E. Warren in Cheyenne. That is cool. Different Bill Nye, not the one we know. Different Bill Nye. So a sign here about the first person to cross America by motorcycle riding from San Francisco to New York City. It took him from May 16th to July 6th in 1903. His name was George A. Wyman, and he was the first person to make this transcontinental trip. Well guys, that's going to do it for us here at the Lincoln. There are so many incredible signs here that you can learn from. The Visitor Center has a great amount of information about this region, and I found this just in one of those kiosks. Definitely, if you are interested in finding cool things along the way, check out the information kiosks, kind of like the one they have here. Pick up some of these brochures. I find so many cool things absolutely free from these places, and you have all of the information about the site so that whenever you go there you already have context, but they also do have some great information again inside, so I definitely encourage you guys to check it out. Remember, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. Thanks for coming along with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.